everyone. Welcome to our new podcast called Mother, Me, Keisha. Yes, Keisha from The Truth Show and Keisha's Gossips and Truths.
And daughter, me, Alexis, from who's currently in college right now. So.
Al-Azaya Chat, which means...
AKA Random Chat.
Yes, that's what it means. Don't you just love Black History Month, despite it being the shortest month of the year? But we're grateful.
With that said, we're going to celebrate and talk about historical events or iconic color figures of history leading to modern times.
Oh, yes, love it. Oh, we're sorry for missing a few podcasts. We've been dealing with a lot of issues.
Yes, legal and death of family issues.
But to make up for it, we're going to drop 3 podcasts for you in a row, starting with the pondering question of what happened to Martin Luther King's younger brother, Alfred Daniel Williams, who died a year after his brother, Martin Luther King Jr., was shot.
An accidental drowning, sure.
I know. Okay, people should know about Alfred is the fact that he too was a co-pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Aside from that, it was how successful he was becoming in the civil rights movement following his brother's death, especially in his campaign for an open housing ordinance. It was because of this and the fact that he was quickly becoming as powerful as his late brother. It was even speculation that Alfred may become the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is an African-American civil rights organization. Then later I read that in Martin Luther King Sr. autobiography, he said Alfred's eldest daughter, Alveda, had been up all night before, and she said, and I quote, she's talking with her father and watching the movie with him. He seemed unusually quiet and not very interested in the film, but he had wanted to stay up. And later, Alveda left him sitting in the easy chair, staring at the TV when she went off to bed. Now, his father had questions about, AD, aka Alfred's death, and still have them now. Because listen to this, he was a good swimmer. So why did he drown? Oh, and his widow, Naomi King, said, and I quote, "There is no doubt in my mind that the system killed my husband."
Wow. You think he was being threatened like his brother Martin was?
Oh, heck yeah. I think that night they may have threatened him again, hence his behavior. But like most men, he didn't want to worry his wife and kids,
And what's crazy is that we didn't hear about this until years later.
Yeah, true.
They really control the media, don't they?
Heck yeah, they do. If they didn't want a certain story to be leaked, it won't be leaked. I mean, come on now. They definitely knew it was going to cause suspicions and a major backlash and another movement, something they did not want again.
Yeah, just like the stabbing of his brother Martin and the killing of George Floyd and so on. Yeah,
I just wish now we all have a movement about the killing spree of African Americans. They're discarding blacks off like unwanted garbage. I mean, it's starting to become ridiculous now.
That's true. There are more deaths of blacks than there are any other race, which raises suspicion on the true intention of this pandemic.
Oh my gosh, yes. And referring back to Martin and Alfred's death and Malcolm X's death as well, there was less civil rights movements or activity done after. It all just seemed to have subsided after their deaths.
It was like they got tired of fighting.
I know how that feels. Yes, I believe they did. And then American government developed a new form of slavery, such as jail. There are more blacks and Hispanics in jail than any other race. I mean, it's so sad.
So true. And while they were fighting for their rights, the white supremacists were destroying their farms and taking their homes.
Oh, yes. I learned about that recently. And listen to this. This is definitely true. And then it went from blacks owning 70%. Yes, 70%. May have got the number a little off, but it's pretty much in the high percentage range of the farmland to barely anything. Take a listen to this. Which brings us to civil rights and all of the rallies and marches. You see, it was in 1935 under the president's supervision of racist Franklin Roosevelt who implemented the Social Security Act of 1935, excluded from coverage about half the workers in the American economy. Among the excluded groups were agriculture and domestic workers, a large percentage of whom were African Americans. This has led some scholars to conclude that policymakers in 1935 deliberately excluded African Americans from the Social Security system because of prevailing racial bias during that period. Which brings us to the Civil Rights Movement. But with all of that fighting, killing, and so on, you see, they were stealing lands from blacks left and right. By the end of civil rights movement, it went from us owning 70% to 50% to a mere 11% and lower of black farmers. The takeover had commenced. Take a look at this.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. Over the 20th century, black people in the U.S. were dispossessed of 12 million acres of land. Half of that loss, 6 million acres, occurred over just 2 decades, from 1950 to 1969, a period largely associated with the civil rights struggle. This mass land dispossession, which affected 98% of black agricultural landowners, is part of the pattern of institutional racism and discrimination that's contributed to the racial wealth gap in the United States. Many of the driving forces behind this land theft were legal and originated in federal policies. In a new article on the history of this massive land theft, our next guest writes, unlike their counterparts even 2 or 3 generations ago, black people living and working in the Delta today have been almost completely uprooted from the soil. Van Newkirk is a staff writer at The Atlantic, where he covers politics and policy. His new piece, The Atlantic's September cover story, is headlined The Great Land Robbery. Can you tell us what this robbery is, Van?
Yes. So the robbery refers to over the course mostly of the 20th century and the mid-20th century and beyond, federally funded and federally directed in some cases, discriminatory effort against African American farmers that wound up by several mechanisms with those farmers losing, like you said, 6 million acres of land over just 19 years, from 1950 to 1969, and most of it concentrated around the civil rights movement, with a lot of that land being taken, a lot of those funds being denied purposefully with the intent of keeping black folks from protesting for their civil rights.
So explain this period, this pivotal period, when millions of acres were taken from black Americans, 1950 to 1969.
Right. The federal government has, they installed a couple of programs during the Great Depression that were basically created American agriculture as we know it today. They subsidize, heavily subsidize crop growing and controlled prices when commodity prices went too low. And they also promoted the creation of larger and larger and more consolidated farms. Those efforts serve to drive lots of small farmers of all races off their farms, but it actually manifested in a kind of novel and even more dire way in heavily black places in the United States. So black folks didn't have a whole lot of land, but they did have sizable holdings in places like Mississippi, which I wrote about. But what those federal reforms did is they gave the money to locally elected boards, and in places across the Deep South, black folks could not vote on those boards. So basically, it gave the plantation owners, their children, their grandchildren, the people who had been on the side of the Confederacy in the Civil War and their descendants, it gave them even more power to dispossess and disenfranchise black farmers, and they used that power pretty extensively to the tune of almost the entirety of black farming collapsing.
I want to turn to a video of Willena Scott White, who's featured in your piece, Van. The Scott family is one of the few families who were able to reclaim land that was possessed by the USDA. She talks here about what happened to her father's land and what that land means to her family.
It grieves me that we were denied a history, and that's how I see it. and I'm going to try not to cry. It's dear to me that my children know what my ancestors went through for us to be where we are and who we are. Because I'm a firm believer that if we don't know our history, then we repeat the mistakes over and over again. My dad's land was taken. It was not foreclosed on by USDA. My dad went in and applied for money to irrigate his beans because it was so hot. The county agent refused to give him a loan to water his crops. He said, y'all not supposed to be farming like this. Y'all farming like white folk. So he cut everything in half that year. This is when they started not being able to get enough money to farm with.
Atlantic Studios. Then can you tell us the story of the Scott family, how their land was lost, how they came to regain it?
Lena's grandfather, Ed Scott Sr., he came from Alabama and got over to Mississippi in the late 19th century. He became a titan in his corner of Mississippi, was just an incredibly gifted farmer, was in many ways more well-respected than some local white farmers by the white establishment. And he was one of those farmers who was just talented and lucky enough to be able to purchase a plot of land, his first 100 acres, from a local guy, P.H. Brooks, a white landowner. And he became one of the early middle-sized landowners, black landowners in the region. He encouraged all of his children to get their own plots of land. They kept it all in common. And over the course of his lifetime, built up, just through sheer talent and force of will, about 1,000 acres of land. His son, Ed Scott Jr., took over in the middle of the 20th century, took over. He fought in World War II, came back, and also became an incredibly talented farmer and farm manager. He also added to those land holdings. What both of them did that marked them as really unique is they managed to not really dabble in or seek out federal funds. They emphasized heavily self-sustainability and leaning on private funding to keep their farm afloat. But in the 1970s and 80s, when we had the major farm crisis and inflation crisis, Ed Scott Jr. had to reach out for federal money. And like Willina said, when he started reaching out, he got a little bit the first year, but then you see the local power structures realize this guy's maybe farming like white folks. The trucks he drives are a little too shiny. And the real difficulty comes when he tries to get into catfish farming, which is heavily subsidized by the federal government. They only offer him the dollar amount that's about half of the average comparable white farmer who is frankly way less competent than Ed Scott Jr. in the region. He gets half the money they get. So even starting out on that endeavor, the catfish endeavor, it's doomed from the start. And so they lose a lot of their land pretty quickly over the 80s and early 90s. And Willina kind of shepherded him through the major black farmers lawsuit, where they won a lot of it back on a discrimination case against the USDA.
So you talk about how ultimately Wall Street got very interested in the land. You write, for example, the Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association, TIAA, one of the largest pension firms in the country, as well as other corporate entities that all own tens of thousands of acres of land in Mississippi and surrounding states. How did these companies come to own this land? And what about the issue of reparations?
Farmland wasn't originally considered a really valuable investment asset. Farmland's volatile. It's difficult to predict from year to year what your yield's going to be, what your rents are going to be. It is an asset that has been considered really below sort of the sterling grade of investment classes. But after the Great Recession, when the dollar weakened, and with the future threats of both climate change and overpopulation, really placing a premium both on land and on arable land for the production of food that's only going to increase in value, farmland became much more attractive to large investors, particularly pension funds. TIAA, which I write about in the piece, is kind of emblematic of the very sudden interest of pension funds in farmland across the United States. right now pension funds in the Mississippi Delta own more land than black folks do there. And how that connects to my story is farmland, most of the farmland in the U.S. is owned already. So where are investors going to look for land from? And it's going to be where it's coming up for auction, where it already is packaged into really large parcels. And that happens most often in the places where it's been stolen from black folks or is being stolen from black folks. So the Mississippi Delta is where some of the largest portfolios in the U.S. are. Connecting to reparations, for one, Wall Street is a major interest right now in farmland that was once owned by black folks. And we have to reckon with that. And we have to reckon with the fact that it was United States federal policy that allowed that. So how do we reckon with the fact that now this lucrative asset class is making money for lots of people across the country who have pension funds, maybe even outside the country, and it's not making money for the African-American farmers and descendants of those farmers who live there, who were enslaved there, and who made the land and who were basically tied to it and were discriminated against there. I think reparations has to be a part of that conversation. You have to start thinking about if the federal government took this money away, they've got to find a way to invest it back into them. And if you think about this as a federal investment in white farmers, in Wall Street eventually, why wouldn't it be ethical? Why wouldn't it be necessary for the federal government to invest in black farmers the same way?
You're talking about something like 12 million acres of land. That's about the size of Vermont and New Hampshire combined. Your final comment, Van.
Yeah, 12 million acres. It is a staggering amount of land, and it amounts to something north of hundreds of billions to perhaps trillions of dollars worth of land, legacy, culture lost. That's titanic, and whatever policy comes next has to be just as titanic.
Van Newkirk, we want to thank you so much for being with us, staff writer at The Atlantic, where he covers politics and policy. We will link to your latest piece, The Atlantic's September cover story, The Great Land Robbery, the shameful story of how 1 million black families have been ripped from their farms.
So you see, the takeover was an agenda to keep blacks suppressed and poor and not in control. They did this by forcing the blacks out of their farms, businesses, and so on by any means necessary. Take a look at this.
I want y'all to take a look at that sign up there. See what it says? Cash for your home. You know what that is? What are y'all, Amos and Andy? Are you stepping and he's fetching? I'm talking about the message, what it stands for. It's called gentrification. It's what happens when the property value of a certain area is brought down. Huh? You listening? Yeah. They bring the property value down. They can buy the land at a lower price. Then they move all the people out, raise the property value, and sell it at a profit. And what we need to do is we need to keep everything in our neighborhood, everything, black. Black owned with black money. Just like the Jews, the Italians, the Mexicans, and the Koreans do.
Ain't nobody from outside bringing down the property value. It's these folk shooting each other and selling that crack rock and shit.
Well, how you think the crack rock gets into the country? We don't own any planes. We don't own no ships. But we are not the people who are flying and floating that shit in here. I know every time you turn on the TV, that's what you see. Black people selling the rock, pushing the rock, pushing the rock. Yeah, I know. But that wasn't a problem as long as it was here. It wasn't a problem until it was in Iowa, and it showed up on Wall Street where there are hardly any black people. Now, if you want to talk about guns, why is it that there's a gun shop on almost every corner in this community?
Why?
Tell you why. For the same reason that there's a liquor store on almost every corner in the black community. Why? They want us to kill ourselves. You go out to Beverly Hills, you don't see that shit. But they want us to kill ourselves. Yeah, the best way you can destroy a people, you take away their ability to reproduce themselves. Yeah. Who is it that's dying out here on these streets every night? Y'all.
Yeah.
Young brothers like yourselves.
What am I supposed to do? Fool roll up, try to smoke me? I'm gonna shoot the motherfucker if he don't kill me first.
You're doing exactly what they want you to do. You have to think, young brother, about your future.
Yeah, and we never recover from that either. I mean, black businesses are barely making money these days, too. It's really sad.
Yeah, and it's crazy how we can become so used to not owning anything, whereas we succumb to the minds of slaves and feel useless and just as mere workers.
That's true. That's true. Which is what they were banking on. I mean, the annihilation and genocide is on high, and they're succeeding thus far. I mean, it's crazy.
I know they made it harder to get any type of loans for blacks now and Hispanics.
Oh my gosh, so true. They still have that race option on applications, and every time I see it now, I cringe. Because for so many years, I was so oblivious to it. You know, it's amazing how you can get used to being treated as a minority, as a alien, if they call it, so to speak, or someone who's definitely insignificant. And in terms of home ownership, all the white, let's say, the white exteriors, high second class, white elite, so to speak, 90% of them don't even stay in the areas they own homes. They stay all in the nice, all white land, you know, Stepford Wives land, and, you know, beautiful homes and stuff like that, where everything is white, whole neighborhood's white. You might see a few black families in there that may have been accepted, at least that's what they think, but it's mainly white. They live out in whatever land, and then they go into the inner city and they own these houses, which they don't really upkeep as much as they possibly can, not as much as they do their houses, and they charge this obscene amount of rent.
Yeah.
You know, and then you have the ones who have no pity and racist as hell, where you can miss one rent payment and they'll put your butt out so freaking fast you'll wonder if he even noticed how on time and how many years you stayed under his or her residency, because you miss one payment, he's ready to kick you out. And I have heard the stories. It's really, really sad how they're still controlling the urban neighborhood, the black neighborhood. And that definitely explains why there are so many districts in the neighborhood, because they don't want to succeed in anything. You know, after slavery and then during segregation and after segregation, it kind of lingered off a little bit, and we started coming up with all these new inventions, and we started learning and things of that nature. We grew really, really fast. I mean, we really grew. So they don't want that to happen. So what they do, they put all these restrictions in the urban neighborhood, and they pull you over for crazy stuff. You continuously treat a person like an animal, more than likely going to start thinking of themselves as an animal. I mean, it's so many black men in jail. It's sad. They don't want us to cohabitate. They don't want us to make more blacks. They want our men to be separated from the black women. And then they want to alienate the black women to think all black men ain't, you know?
Yeah.
And then you have the black men who think the black women ain't, you know, excuse my language, but there's really another word to say that's that deadly, you know, because that's what they want you to do. They don't want us to produce. They don't want us to grow our seeds and our people. They don't want us to do that. They want us to stay criminals.
Yeah.
And Martin Luther King brother was a prime example of them stopping the movement, because they knew eventually he was going to grow and he was going to have kids and this is going to grow. It was like, oh, heck no, we ain't dealing with this again. You know what I mean? So they had to get rid of him real quick. I mean, seriously, he was starting to really grow. He wasn't going to go to the full extent in terms of presidency, but he was probably going to change his mind later on down the line. And he was only a year younger than his brother. So, you know, he was definitely following that path. They both were pastors. I mean, they both had that passion. Yeah, his brother kind of was, you know, dealing with he was like a Malcolm X kind of story.
Yeah. He
had some little crime early in his life, and he turned his life around and became a pastor. So they kind of shared that whole similar lifestyle, you know what I mean? But still, he still came around and, you know, decided to fight for civil rights. And I knew that after reading that and then what he was getting into, I knew, yeah, they had to do what they had to do, and they're still doing that right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What do you think, Lexi?
Well, the thing is, you'll have other black people who try to open up black-owned businesses in these kind of majority black neighborhoods, and oftentimes or not, you'll have these same black owners ended up dying like shortly after their own open up the business in that neighborhood. And there's always other people who are struggling going to that black business, stealing, robbing, and eventually killing that black owner. And it's like you have these other people who want to who are black, who want to support the black neighborhoods, who want to lift it up.
Right.
And you have other black people who are just so focused on trying to come up and trying to financially support themselves that they end up destroying the exact same black businesses that's trying to say, hey, yes, it's a majority black neighborhood, but look, we can have nice things too. We can have like a good business, like. But then you have other black people who are destroying their own neighborhood, who's stopping other black people who's trying to bring up their own neighborhood.
And bring up the property value of their neighborhood. Yeah, it used to be where, you didn't really trust going into white establishments. You only trusted going into black establishments when it comes to eating or shopping. Now it's getting to the point where you don't even trust your own people. You rather go to the white people. You see how they kind of flipped the script over the decades?
Yeah.
That make you not even trust your own people or think your own people even sanitary enough to even be trusted to feed you, which is a brainwashing mentality. I mean, I think I showed a video not too long ago, and kids were being asked, they were like, who do you think is beautiful? They thought this is how the brainwashing system works. They thought their kind was ugly and just criminal in it. They thought the white, beautiful, blue-eyed woman or kid or whatever, or baby, was considered beautiful. So it's that brainwashing mentality. I mean, you have the thievery and the robbery, and the cops enable it because they don't put in much attention to trying to solve those crimes in the black neighborhoods. So they giving these young thugs, so to speak, the okay to rob their own people. Like, go ahead and rob your own people. You have a 90% of chance of not getting caught by robbing your own people. Hence why they won't take their behinds. And first of all, they shouldn't be stealing in the first place. They should be trying to better their lives. Go back to school and, get an education. I mean, make this a testimony to young kids just like you, instead of robbing and stealing and think, where your future going to either be dead or in jail. We don't need any more black men in jail. Okay, you didn't have a father figure in your life. Malcolm X didn't have really a father figure either. I think Judge Joe Brown, one of them, they didn't have a really father figure either. He a freaking judge. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to have a father figure. My mom was, so what? So, the stories I can tell you about my mom and my dad will have you cringe. That is not an excuse. Seriously, I think kids need to stop giving excuses, stop being lazy, get off their sorry asses, and I'm cursing today, and make something out of their lives. You know what I mean? I think that's what kids need to start doing. I think that's what we need to start doing. I think that's what kids need to start doing. And we need to build up our black community and stop acting like freaking animals and stop counting on the cops to solve crimes in your cities because they don't give a. Why would the cops care about you destroying your own neighborhood? Come on now, think. They don't care.
I mean, that's very obvious. You'll think with the amount of robberies that happens in the neighborhood of black communities, and how they don't do anything about those robberies or whatever that happens, like black crimes, black deaths, blacks going missing.
Right, they don't even care about black kids. I mean, the amount of kids that come up missing, the black kids come up missing, it just breaks my heart because they really do not freaking care about black kids missing. And some white kids too, but they don't get as much publicity.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, and unless we start doing something about it as a community, making or developing a neighborhood watch for the community or something like that, or opening up community centers in your area so kids can have somewhere to hang out and play and stuff. They used to do that back in the day. I haven't seen very many of them. That would be one of the to-do lists that I'll probably do. When I get money, I'm trying to think positive here, not if. When I get money, I'm definitely going to be opening up community centers in the neighborhood and give these kids something to do. All they need is some guidance. They need a story. They need a helping hand. And if you're not going to give them a helping hand, they're going to do the easy way out, selling drugs, their bodies, or stealing and robbing. And they're going to rob in your neighborhood because they are afraid of getting caught and they know the cops don't care. You know what I mean? And the cops really don't care because they don't stay in that black neighborhood anyway. You know what I mean? So, of course, they're going to rob their people. And they know their people are struggling. Them fools don't. They're not stupid. They just know the cops don't care. And they don't.
Yeah.
They want to keep the blacks down. They want to keep them just suffering all the time. And then the movies don't make it any better because they're not even motivating the blacks. They're keeping these movies stereotype, because it's not like that in all black neighborhoods. Please don't take this whole podcast the wrong way. It's not like what the movies say in the black neighborhood. You know, you have what is that, Boys in the Hood. Then you have that movie with Denzel Washington, you know, and stuff like that. I think a recent movie came out that I didn't even bother to watch because I think Wesley Snipes was in it. I was like, oh, nope, not watching it. Kind of grew up in that kind of thing.
Well, now we on the topic of that, I do want to say, state my opinion.
Yeah, you've been quiet long enough in this podcast. I get tired of hosting the podcast, young lady.
Sorry, you know, I just love to listen.
Host enough at work.
But since we're on the topic, though, I do want to say something. It's about how movies, not only just movies, actually, just the media in general, how they depict black neighborhoods and black people in general. Mm-hmm. And how I do have an issue about how they make this stereotype that all black people or majority of black people are poor, or the neighborhoods are very dangerous. All black neighborhoods, it's very crime filled. You have supposed drug lords, and they really paint this picture that we're just so extremely dangerous. And whenever a group of black people are together, you have other races automatically assuming this, because the media portrays this, that, oh my gosh, they must be doing something criminal or something illegal, instead of just black people just coming together to celebrate something.
Right.
And I feel that they promote this so much that us as black people, we starting to buy into this crap. And you have other black people making the exact same assumptions that the media wants you to make, thinking that, oh my gosh, like, there's a group of black people.
This is what we have to do, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have other black people, like calling the police, like, oh my god, this is like a huge group of black people over there. Must be illegal, right? Must be illegal.
I know. And that's where Bill Cosby was trying to stray us away from being depicted as. Because if you have, first of all, the people who play these and make these scripts have not lived in that kind of neighborhood for decades.
But those people don't understand what, like, detriment their scripts and movies are doing to black people.
And how is living up to what white people, not all white people, because all white people are not racist. I have some friends who are white. Let me just point this out right now for Alexis and I. We are not racist. We have friends of all races, and I love all races. I only judge you by your character, and that's literally coming from a mixed person. We're both mixed. We only judge by character, not by the color of your skin or your background. Point that out. Live up to it. I am it. Thank you. Moving right along here. Now, I think their scripts are literally brainwashing and living up to whatever stereotype the white races already think of black people, which is not true, which is what Bill Cosby tried to stray us away from being depicted as. We need to convert the script. You have the Tyler Perrys, and you have, what's that gay dude?
I know what you're talking about.
He made Empire. His name escaped me. Him. We have him, and so on and so forth. And China knows, she give people, black people, a nice little title. I love her. Shonda Rhimes is my girl. Huge fan, by the way. I want my working with you one day, if you ever.
Mom.
Okay, sorry, I had to plug that. Anyway, but still, I think we need to get away from being depicted as that kind of person. I think they need to stop doing that. We need to motivate our people, not make them seem like their level is ghetto and ghetto fabulous and whatever. I think that needs to stop. We can't be lawyers. We can't be judges. We can't be doctors and commissioners and so on. Hence who are in the office now. We can be anything we want. We are not what they claim we are. And we need to get our freaking man out of jail. Get them some counseling. I know this is off the subject, but it bothers me. By having these black men in jail, it has to affect them mentally, emotionally. I mean, does that make them better or does that make them worse? Being in jail so long.
I mean, to be honest, I saw
probably bisexual now.
I saw other YouTube videos, and it's actually interesting. For people like viewers, you should really watch some YouTube videos about people who used to be inmates and how they talk about their experience of being in jail. And then some of them even say that they end up going back to jail because they don't know how to live in regular society. Imagine being in jail, seriously, 3 years is a long time to be stuck in one place, being controlled. And
that actually explains a lot.
And a lot of them don't know how to get jobs anymore. A lot of them don't know how to conform to society.
And they can't get jobs because they have a criminal history.
Exactly.
So they literally They just talk about the system. The system is twisted against them.
Yeah, so they end up going back to jail because
a new form of slavery.
Because they can't get a job, and if they can't get a job, you can't get a place to live. And if you can't get a place to live, naturally you're going to end up on the streets. But if you're on the streets though, and you have a criminal background, most likely you're getting arrested again. So then they end up back in jail
or becoming a rapper or something, which is not a good career.
But the thing is, it's a vicious cycle, and
it's like it's literally rigged for them to stay in jail.
Yeah, and it ends up like
that. I know, that's really sad. You know, that's really, really freaking sad. You can't get a job because you have the system is literally rigged to keep them slaves in jail. A new form of slavery that needs to stop. I think it should be whatever level crime you have done. I think if you went to jail for petty crime like possession of marijuana or, stuff like that, or robbing even.
Yeah, but a lot of them are like those people I told you on YouTube. A lot of them are in jail for like petty stuff. It's not like murder. Like, think about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think they need to level out the acceptance and make a discriminatory or something like that, refusing a person a job based on these kinds of crimes. You know, it has to be some kind of limitations on if you're discriminating. I see if they. First of all, pedophiles should, I'm not going there right now, and murderers and rapists and so on, people of that magnitude of kind of crime levels, I think it should be harder for them to get a job. But if we're talking about robbing or something that is in the survival, so to speak, mode, where, okay, I had to sell drugs because, even though it's really bad, because I had kids, had blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So same story, different guy. All I'm going to say, I couldn't do this, so I had to sell drugs. I didn't want to do it, but I had to do it. So I think it should be a level of acceptance, and it should be discriminatory for a job to refuse a man or a woman a job based on those attributes or their backgrounds, criminal backgrounds. That's what I think. But that's just me. I would probably give the guy a chance. I mean, because how he's going to change if no one's going to give him a chance and you don't want to hire him because he have a criminal background? I mean, that's not fair. It's okay. Then what? I might as well go ahead, like you said, and go back to jail then.
Because a lot of them end up going back to jail because they can't get a job and they can't have a place to stay and not only that, your information is on the internet. So then you have, believe me, this does happen, and I didn't know if I want to talk about it. But sometimes you have like some police officers might set them up though, because especially if they are really like good workers in jail, they'll have them try to set them up so they could end up back in jail, and then they'll be working again
for free
in jail again. So I mean that does happen. And I didn't know if I want to say that, but that does sometimes happen to some people because your information is on the internet.
Yeah, it's free for everyone to see. Yeah. And the killing part is, in terms of criminals or past criminals getting jobs, it definitely depending on race because white people are known. Whoever has criminal backgrounds, they actually has been record to get a job a lot easier than a black man who has a criminal background history. Which is ironic because, as I stated in many podcasts, black people are not the most violent people.
I know.
We're not going to go around killing a whole gazillion, quadrillion bunch of people and then burying you in our basement or eating you or putting you in our refrigerators and having you for months and, cream of wheat in the morning with our coffee. I mean, seriously, we're not those kinds of people. So for us to be depicted as that is something the media and America has literally brainwashed people to depict us as. So it's really sad because there's nothing you can freaking do about it.
Yeah.
We can make a movement, but we're not in a high elite of that kind of a government to make those kind of changes. All we can do is just put the word out there and just praise someone who is in that kind of elite government that can hear us and make some changes and make it discriminating and discriminatory for any job to refuse a man or woman of, let's just call it white collar crimes, so to speak. Unless it's a murder or rape or pedophile or anything of the nature, they should not be refused a job. They should get a second chance. I think they need to make that as a law because that's not fair. How can an ex-criminal get better and become better if you're putting up the brick walls for him to become better? He has no other choice but to go back to doing what he was doing before or worse. And we don't want that. Just saying. And I believe that black people, just like Martin Luther King's brother, He led a criminal life prior to him getting involved in the civil rights movement, following his brother's footsteps. And many other leaders that we see right now who are judges, they have their stories. Do not let that stop you from making a difference. Do not let that stop you for changing. And good luck. That's all I can say. Good luck to you all. Our next podcast will be about Bill Cosby. I spoke about him a lot because he's going to be next. Well, that's it for today's podcast. Tune in for Tuesday's podcast.
Oh, yes. We are here every Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah, and we have a lot more coming. No filter, especially you, Mom.
Anyway, talk to you all later.
Well, bye-bye.